All right. Well, welcome everyone to another Reltio community show. I'm Chris Stutzel. I'm a customer community and engagement director here at Reltio. We also have Stanley and Rakesh. Both are very new, or the first timers on a Reltio community show. So super excited to have them on today. Today's show will be on preparing for your Reltio implementation. Lots of exciting stuff around implementation here. Um, Here's some rules before we get started: is keep yourself on mute. Hopefully yeah, it looks like everybody's on mute, so that's good. All questions should be asked in chat, or feel free to take yourself off of mute and ask your questions. I will be moderating, so your question will be asked. The call is going to be recorded as usual and posted on the community. And two things is, one is take the survey at the end of the call. There is a Zoom pop-up that shows up when you leave, so any feedback and all feedback is welcome. I do take that into consideration when coming up with shows. And then we will have kind of a poll today at the end, so looking forward to that as well. Trying to be a little bit more interactive. So we do have some upcoming events. There's one or two that I haven't posted yet, but will soon. Today's show is on preparing for your implementation. That's today. And then tomorrow, we actually have one called Unlocking Trusted Data for Profitable Growth in the Insurance Industry. And then 17th, Maximizing Operational Efficiency with Reltio's APIs for Real-Time MDM. And then on the 18th, I just love doing two shows in a week, but we'll be densifying entity data as a product, an introduction to data mesh and data as a product for customer data with Reltio. And then on the 25th of May, real-time customer API with Reltio Integration Hub and MuleSoft. Some really good technical stuff coming up. Really excited. The last thing is, and I've mentioned this before, Reltio is sponsoring in a big way an event called, it's an industry event called Data Driven 2023. It's a modern data management conference. It's on October 3rd through 5th, 2023 here in Dallas, Texas. I'm in Dallas, so it's pretty easy for me. More to come on that, but registration will be opening up in the next week or so. So certainly excited about that. Would love for you to come to that, and the link is there and everything else now, to at least get notified when that registration opens, which should be in the next week. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Stanley, and let you guys go.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris. Excited to be part of the community here, proper getting a presentation. And so thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for doing it.
Okay, can you see my screen?
We can.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. Okay, a little bit about myself, and I'll have Rakesh introduce himself after as well. Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Appreciate you joining, making the time here to listen in. As we progress, please feel free to throw questions in chat. We'll try to address them as best as possible. I will also have a poll in a little bit here to get a feel for the audience. We'll try to address those questions if you have them, and then we will have a session towards the end. About myself, I'm Stanley Jarris. I am one of our practice directors out of professional services for Reltio. 15 plus years in the industry, leading professional services and also leading SaaS implementations specifically. Today, we will talk about how do you prepare for these implementations? What does it look like prior? So if you're thinking about implementing Reltio, you're about to, or just curious about the topic, what are the things you should be executing beforehand, such as data readiness, all the things so you can really take off and fly through these as efficiently as possible. So we really look forward to the discussion. Rakesh, you want to say hello to everybody?
Thank you, Stanley. Good morning, good evening, everyone. My name is Rakesh. Been with Reltio for a year now. We've been working on Reltio since 2016 and MDM solutions since 2011. We are here today to walk you all through about how to prepare for the Reltio implementation. Looking forward for all the questions. Over to you, Stanley.
All right. Quick overview of the topics that we have for you today. We'll briefly cover the methodology that this preparation leads to. So what are we preparing for? That ultimate delivery, that the setup of MDM. We will cover, and also, if you get more curious and you really want to get depth on the methodology, Sarah Lyons did a great presentation via community on that, so please check it out. After that, we'll cover when sprinting, when you are ready to rock, what does that look like? How do you get there? Ready comes before set and go. So we'll really spend some time there. We'll cover our checklist specifically that we have for this preparedness. We'll also cover what a pre-sale scoping sheet looks like, and a bit on requirements even deeper. So we'll go a few layers in to really give you a deep feel for how to prepare and what parameters to think about for your implementation. We'll cover the most common value blockers from that. So you'll hear a bit of repetition on what we really need to accomplish before we start an implementation. We'll hit the Reltio way one more time from a different dimension and viewpoint, just to see where those values play into when accomplished. And then we'll close out with an overview on the ideal team structure you can expect, what the roles from our services team look like, and what the roles from the customer partner teams look like. All right. First up is our Reltio way methodology. So where are we going when we're preparing here? Just to give you the goal line a little bit, what are we trying to get to? And from Reltio, what do we as a best practice like to accomplish? For our methodology, this is something that we've been developing over a number of years now. It's a prescriptive methodology. It levers our proven implementation practices. On that far left side there, the checklist, that's what we're focusing on today. This is a readiness process to ensure that you are ready to go for the implementation, or the customer that you're supporting is ready, and what goes into that. In the middle, we do leverage a agile framework. This also leverages our velocity packs. So we do have pre-structured tenants that are designed for a given use case to execute on quickly. So they're already configured, and there may be some modification, of course, once we get moving based on requirements, but that really speeds us along and is something unique to us. Lastly, within that, we use the phased approach. This is comprised of three milestones, with sprint 1 being data quality. So we want to get data in as quickly as we can to give you an output, feel, and read on what the quality of that data. And that's in about 30 days. We'll try to go even quicker. By 45 days, we want to get to sprint 3. That's producing the Reltio ID across those sources. So getting match tuning, match analysis done on those sources. And then lastly, the key thing, within 90 days, we want to have a go live where a downstream system is consuming this data that we've now configured. So that's the goal line. Let's dig into how to get there. So we're interested, we see the value. Stanley, you're telling me we can get you there in 90 days when so many folks out there are taking 6 months, 9 months, depending on the use case, 5 months. How do we get there in 90 days? How do we hit the start line flying, sprinting versus crawling and walking? So we'll step through the checklist here. This will include things like requirements, data profiling, access, training, integration. We'll hit all those. So our goal is to get you there as ready as possible. So what does this look like? I will share this with Chris. So this is part of the material we'll have out there that you can access and complete yourselves. Now, for our implementations, this is something that you can expect someone like myself, one of our practice directors, to do with you before an implementation even starts. So let's say you're evaluating Reltio and you're in that pre-sale cycle and you're discussing, hey, what do I need? How do we get there? We will have this structured checklist to go through with target dates and actual dates that we populate. And then once that team is assigned to complete the work, I would then hand that to them and they know exactly where we're at and what hasn't been accomplished so we can knock those items out. Now, Rakesh, before I hand it over to you for requirements, let me do that poll real quick. Ooh, and did it populate? Chris, I think you already had that pre-populated. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. I wondered about that.
Is that the first time you've pre-populated a poll that way?
No.
Oh.
I just,
You're a pro.
but I love these.
I'll give it another few seconds.
Yeah, it looks like people are still. Give it
On an active implementation.
10 more, 10 more seconds. All right. Well, they're still going. So we have about 40.
All right. What do you think? Does it cap the poll off at the 60-second timer?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you for everyone that participated in the poll. Chris, are you able to see the results, or do I need to let me hit end poll here. And then do I hit share and that'll show it out to everybody?
That is correct. Yeah.
Hey, good job, Zoom. That makes sense. So thank you very much again for the feedback, folks on. Looks like our biggest grouping is active implementations, which is great. And then a pretty broad representation, though, live with Reltio, evaluating. So certainly for those evaluating, this fits right in. And then those, if you're considering future phases, this is something that I would still highly recommend as a thought process, especially as you're expanding to new domains. Many of these activities still need to be repeated for that. Okay. So last thing, Rakesh, before I kick it off to you. So again, what you see on the screen here is a checklist we would execute prior to the implementation. Rakesh will share with you requirements that are common to this. So that'll be the first topic. And we'll also share what it would look like in the scoping exercise. So we have one more Word document that we would populate to understand, does this fit in our out of the box, and then discuss with you if there are certain requirements that put us beyond a phase one. How would we recommend to do that in subsequent phases so that you can receive that fast value in 90 days, but then continue to progress to those broader data transformation goals, business objectives, and make sure we still get you to that as well. So Rakesh, over to you on requirements.
Thank you, Stanley. Now that we have seen the methodology and we have seen the list of prerequisites, let's do a deep dive on each of those. So the first one here is the requirements. Again, when we say requirements, I mean, this is the biggest in this whole list, because the day one, when we start this implementation, we want to ensure all the requirements are available, and start with the configuration so that we could achieve the first milestone at the end of sprint one. Now, what we look in the requirements is basically the functional and non-functional requirements. We do have two templates. One is the detailed checklist of the requirements, and second thing is the user stories that we usually recommend all the customers and partners to cover when we talk about the requirements. So Stanley, if you can bring the requirements checklist, we can probably do a deep dive on each of those. So the first one is the domains that needs to be mastered in the MVP phase. This is pretty much decided early in the sales cycle or in the pre-implementation phase. So this is pretty easy to populate. Typically, depending on the vertical, the domains would vary. So once we have the domains finalized, we then go to the data sources, like basically the source systems that we want to sync, or we want to integrate with Reltio. Again, when we talk about the source systems, we basically talk about the volume, the number of records we want to bring in. The next thing is the attributes that we want to sync to the Reltio. So one advantage we have with the velocity packs or the accelerator is basically the Reltio data model is available. Now all we have to do is identify the attributes within the within each of the source systems, basically map that to the velocity pack data model and identify the delta attributes that needs to be configured in the Reltio. That way, it'll be pretty easy. The day one when you are on the implementation, what attributes need to be brought in from each of the source systems and what are the additional attributes that needs to be configured. We can quickly do that configuration and move towards achieving the sprint one milestone. While we talk about the source system, we'll also have to figure out the integration pattern and the frequency. When we talk about the integration patterns, we have different ways to integrate data to Reltio. We'll be looking at a few of those in the next slide. And talking about the frequency, we all know whether we want to bring in the data in batch, real time, near real time, etc. And for each of these, we have different ways to achieve that integration. And we should also figure out what style of architecture we want to implement. If you are talking about pushing the data back to source systems, and then we'll have to figure out certain nitty-gritties related to that integration. So we need to figure out how the data should go back to the source systems, what sort of integration patterns are required to sync the data back into the source systems. So these are pretty much the aspects related to the source systems. So once we finalize these source systems, the next big thing is the data volume. Basically, what sort of filter conditions or what sort of data needs to come in from each of the source systems. Most of the times, we usually forget about the filter conditions. There may be certain set of records which do not satisfy all the criteria that needs to be available for an MDM solution. So in that case, we need to figure out if we need to bring that data into Reltio or not. So basically identify the filter conditions, identify the volume that you need to bring in, not only for the initial loads, but also for the ongoing loads as well. And apart from the master data, we do also have interactions. That's another type of record that we can bring into Reltio. So if at all, if we have any requirements related to the interactions, we need to figure out all the parameters for bringing in those interactions as well. So now we've figured out the source systems, we've figured out the volume. The next thing is to talk about or document the business rules and the standardization / the cleansing rules. So when we talk about standardization, we usually deal with the transformation cleansing rules. Again, Reltio has out of the box cleansing out of the box cleansing components. We have address standardization, address cleansing via locate. We have phone and email standardization / cleansing as well. MVP, we usually configure out of the box. We go with the out of the box implementation. And if at all, if there's any customization required, we usually look at a future phase. That's mostly because we want to show value in the 90 days. We want to go live with the implementation in 90 days. But again, if there's any customization that needs to be done within the first 90 days, we do take that into the consideration. Now, apart from the transformations and the cleansing rules, we'll also look at the match rules and survivorship rules. Again, this is a little tricky. Like most of the customers will have some challenges to identify the match rules and the survivorship rules because the profiling is still in progress. The data is not, in the Reltio yet. But again, if we come up with the base rules, based on our understanding of the data, that would really help the implementation team to document the rules and start working on the design. Velocity packs do have these pre-configured, so we can also refer to the velocity pack documentation for getting the initial rules, and most of the time those rules satisfy the requirements, and we can then build on top of it based on how the data looks like. Moving forward, Stanley, if you scroll down, the next big thing, while we figure out all these rules, there's another activity called data profiling that we do in parallel. That's basically an activity to understand how good or bad the data is. Again, like Stanley will be talking about the data profiling in a few minutes. UI. Big question, right? I mean, do we need any sort of localization? Is English sufficient? How does the UI should look like? There are multiple facets. There are attributes, there are groups of attributes, there are contact attributes, there are basic attributes. There are other facets, like the relationship facet, potential matches facet, etc. Where should each of those facets should fit in? How should a typical UI should look like with the MDM data in it? If we can capture those information early on, it'll also help in capturing the data in that way. But again, most of the times what happens with the UI is once the data is loaded into the Reltio, the users will get a feel of it, and we can further customize it. So usually what we have seen is MVP, we go with the way that is configured in the velocity pack, and then we do changes as and when there are requirements. The next big thing is the user roles, access privileges, and security. Again, this is more required from the workflow and the data stewardship standpoint. If we know what sort of roles need to be configured, what sort of access controls need to be in place, basically the data security, like not everybody should have edit access on the data. We basically restrict it to the read-only users. So if we have a rough idea of those, it's good to capture those in the requirements document.
Hey, Rakesh, quickly. So in this list that's being shared, should it be followed in order from where you started to where you're at now? Or?
Not really. I mean, there is if we go to the methodology, right? I mean, I'm sure Sarah would have covered that. We do follow sprint, multiple sprints, right? And in each of the sprints, we cover certain aspects. So we can probably identify the most important ones that are required for the day one, and try to fill in those to start with, and then we can document the rest of the other things. But yeah, there isn't any order that we need to follow, but I would say, we should definitely start with the source systems. I mean, if we don't know what source systems we are bringing in, then rest of the other things wouldn't matter much. So the source systems would be first, followed by the data profiling, and then rest of the other things can come in.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. Like you said, Rakesh, we're going to focus on the source systems right away. How many? What are we looking at? What's the volume and profiling? And the rest follow.
And the rest can come in. Yes. Workflow. Out of the box, we do have 3 workflows configured. The potential match workflow, the delete profile workflow, because we don't want everybody and anybody to delete without any approvals, and the data change request. These are available, but if any customization is required, we'll have to document those. Or if we have any additional requirements on configuring additional workflows, then those will also have to be covered in the requirement document. The next big thing is integration. We did cover that in the source systems, but talking about it again, we want to know what sort of integration patterns are preferred. Now, Reltio has multiple ways to integrate data. That's pretty much available in the in the portal. So it would help if the project team from the client side or the partner side go over the different integration patterns and identify what integration pattern suits best, would save a lot of time. And again, this can I mean, if we are not able to finalize the integration pattern, we can figure that probably in the first week, because if we are talking about bringing in some additional components like connectors, that requires some infrastructure changes. Like basically we'll have to reach out to the team to get it enabled if it is not done already. So once the integration patterns are finalized, we also talk about the downstream, right? 90-day, we usually recommend the batch extracts. The extracts should be available in the downstream for the consumption. Typically, files get loaded to the analytics layer or the reporting layer so that the analysts can work on the downstream data. So basically identify the requirements around extracts, like what attributes need to be extracted out, how should the golden copy look like, and the frequency, basically, like how should the extracts we generate, like you want a daily or monthly, etc. Typically, what we see is the day one we go with the full files, and then we go with daily feeds. The
I
next
do have another question, if you don't mind. Can DCR be used for new profile creation?
Yes, the data change request can be used for the new profile creation as well.
Great answer, quick and easy. Thank you.
All right. The next thing is the connectors. Again, this is part of the integration patterns. Reltio does have a lot of connectors. Like if you want to integrate the Salesforce, then we have the Salesforce connector. We have connectors for the enrichment sources like DNB, BVD, etc. Again, depending on the integration pattern, if you're proceeding with the SFDC connector, then it'll be a good idea to capture what attributes need to be synced between the Salesforce and Reltio. Or if you're talking about enrichment, then it'll also help what attributes should be brought in through these enrichment sources. So a simple document with all the fields listed out should be great. And also, if you're talking about the DNB, BVD, etc., I mean, these are third-party enrichment sources. So, getting the licenses in place, having the keys ready, having the access credentials ready would also save a lot of time. And then the next topic, the data enrichment, is quite pretty much we covered about, like identify what sort of enrichment sources we need to deal with, and also identify if we should get that enrichment via the connector or via any other mode of integration. The last two topics, the big thing is RDM here. While we deal with the master data, we also deal with the reference data. So identify what attributes need to be part of this reference data management solution. So basically have the mapping ready, like identify what the canonical or the standard value should be, and also the values that are coming in from all the source systems, basically the non-standard values. So if we have this ready, the day one we load this along with the RDM mapping, and your data is pretty standardized. So when you look at the DQ dashboard on the end of sprint one, you can identify what non-standard values are not mapped, and it'll be easy to add those non-standard values into the RDM rather than figuring out all the non-standard values. So it definitely adds a lot of value to the solution from the DQ perspective, and it makes life easier when we deal with the implementation. And the last thing is customization. Again, we typically use customization, and if we have to talk about customization in the Reltio language, we refer to it as an LCA, the lifecycle actions. We usually take this route for the transformations. I mean, if we have any transformations which are not achievable in the Reltio, then we usually go with the customization. Again, we do some sort of analysis here, like we figure out which is the ideal way for customization. Either it has to be done in the ETL layer, the ingestion layer, or in the Reltio. Depending on the best route, we figure out what needs to be done, and if at all, if LCA is required, we do capture this requirement. Typically, this is not known before the implementation, but this can be captured if we are dealing with non-MVP phases. Like if we have already experienced something like this in the MVP, and we want to we want to like repeat this in future phases, then it's always advisable to capture those requirements as well. So this pretty much sums up what needs to be covered in the requirements. Again, this is a checklist. This talks about the different components that needs to be covered in the requirements. We will be sharing this template along with the presentation, and this is pretty handy.
Hey, Rakesh, is there an API where we can get all of the open DCR assigned to a user?
I mean, so we do have the inbox, right? I mean, that basically on the UI, there is an inbox component, and if the user goes into that inbox, the user should be able to see all the DCRs that are assigned there.
Okay, thank you. Quickly, what about locate not working for non-USA countries?
I mean, locate does support non-US countries, and again, I understand it is not as strong as it works in US. So typically what we do is we do load some data with the locate configuration and see how it works. I mean, if it is doing its job well, then we usually continue to have the locate for other countries as well.
Does Reltio have
Hi, Rakesh.
reporting?
Gunjita this side.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, actually, we have Gunjita this side. We have implemented locate in our Reltio implementation for other countries. It is not working. Okay, so we have majority of the data for like 48% is of like USA. Apart from that, 52% is of non-USA, but locate is not working for that one. So we reached out to Reltio for the respective
You are breaking up completely, so we can't
Yeah.
really understand.
concern.
Yep.
They told us that there will be a global
Gunjita, we're losing you a bit there.
So what is that?
Gunjita,
Yes.
we're sorry, we're losing your audio.
Yeah, please.
Could we perhaps, could you reach out to Chris and I, if we can put our emails in chat, and I'd be happy to help you after the show here
Hello.
and track that down.
Well, right now, can you write?
Yeah, just shoot us an email.
I'll put
And
mine.
yeah, let me put. Yeah, just shoot us an email, and we'll make sure to reach out and make sure you get the help. So a couple of more questions. Does Reltio have reporting capabilities? I don't know if that we can answer that particularly here. But I know we do have some type of reporting, Stanley. I don't know if you can answer that, but
Yeah.
We
Go
do
ahead,
have
go ahead.
some level of reporting.
Hey,
Again,
Rakesh, am I audible right now? Gunjita this side.
yeah, just
Gunjita, can we
Yeah.
take a question?
Yes, well, let's hold that for after, if you don't mind, Gunjita.
okay. Let's keep going. How about implementation? Or so I'm sorry. You wanted to go ahead and Rakesh answer that one question about reporting.
That's right. I mean, we do have some capabilities on the reporting, but just want to understand what exactly the requirements are so that we can answer the question accurately.
Okay. How about implementation? Want to maintain enterprise ID from legacy platform? How will it make that impact implementation timeline? How does that impact the implementation timeline?
I mean, it absolutely doesn't impact the timelines because we do have something called as Reltio ID. That's right now that's EA. But there is good amount of documentation available in the docs portal. You can migrate the enterprise IDs from the legacy without any impact on the implementation timeline.
Okay. Can we integrate ADF or Zero Data Factory with Reltio? Sorry, to push data into Reltio? Is that possible?
Azure Data Factory, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, so basically, what we recommend is, if you're talking about the batch implementation, then we can integrate with the storage, the Azure cloud storage, and we can pull the files from there.
So just a quick, and thanks, Robert, for putting this in there, but just a thought here is non-US address validation. Just check your Reltio locate config. It lists the countries you're licensed for. If you don't have the other countries in the list, then it's not going to cleanse. So thank you. And then another question, how about implementation? You want to maintain enterprise ID from legacy. How will that impact implementation timelines? I think we answered that.
I think we answered that, yes. No impact on the timelines.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Let's keep going. And let's try to restrict these to implementation specific questions on this one. I know locate's not necessarily an implementation thing, but we can certainly help with that. And Stanley put that information into the chat, his information. So let's keep going.
Yep, please. Definitely want to help. And thank you. We'll keep taking as many questions as we can. Appreciate you bringing those, Chris.
Yep.
Okay. Great walkthrough there, Rakesh. Thank you very much. So, and you can see this requirements topic generating all these thoughts and ideas, right? Which is why we spend so much time on it. So what Rakesh just walked through is the scoping checklist that we would execute. So we do have a true, more specific requirements document that would be more of a deliverable that we then memorialize. But that is that thought discussion generating topic that would precede our preparedness checklist that we'll finish out here, and that then leads into our implementations. So to finish this checklist, and this is what we would do right before we start, and to make sure we're doing all these things. And so we've knocked out requirements, and we do run Agile, right? So we're not going to have all the answers. The customer's not going to have all the answers yet, but we want to get as close as we can. We want to start all those conversations like what we're seeing in chat, where these are so critical to work through. And we may know there are going to be some bumps. So to start working on them, at day 0 versus, right before UAT is just critical. Next up here to walk through these is data profiling. Another great resource that I'll click into here briefly is our docs portal. So this is something you can access as well. This has so many great best practices, some just general MDM concepts and strategies for folks newer to it, and then more core Reltio specific best practices to really upskill yourself on the product when you have questions. To highlight a few things briefly here on data profiling, so once you reach that step, definitely check this page out, check out the docs portal. We're shooting for 10% or greater of the data within that. And then I would check out this section as well. This gives you some good dimensions that we're looking for to execute on when that's accomplished, such as number of unique values, null values, the type of attribute, max and min length on the attribute, average length, and most frequent values. Let me come back to the checklist here. Definitely check out the docs portal. This you can access it if you haven't before, in a link right from this doc. Rakesh, you want to hit availability?
Sure. So one of the important things what we have seen in the past is most of the clients do not have approvals to load good data in the lower environment. I mean, if we not dev, but at least our SIT environment, we need the PII data to be loaded into the SIT environment, so that one thing, we do have the data quality dashboard, which sort of talks about the profiling, basically gives you all the metrics about the data. The early we get, the better, so that we know what sort of rules need to be built to get the data corrected. And also, I mean, one thing what we recommend is, start working on the approvals much earlier in the life cycle. Like if you start working on the approvals after the implementation is started, then we might get delayed in getting the data in a secured way. I mean, if we know the process beforehand, it would help. Like sprint 1, you have the DQ dashboard available. Business users can view the dashboard and they get a feel of the data. Over to you, Stanley, on the Reltio training.
Excellent. Okay, and another plug here, our Reltio training and academy. Definitely check it out. As you can see, it is on our preparedness checklist, so something we want everyone to be going through prior to your implementations. This will give you a great feel if you're new to MDM and MDM concepts. There's material there to get you quickly up to speed, really well done and put together. Additionally, there are courses and paths more specific to MDM configuration and architecture, and how do you come at a design approach for these, especially if you're coming from legacy MDM platforms. So you have those core foundations. I still highly recommend these. With our structure and architecture and leveraging that graph technology, which is highly scalable. It is a bit different approach and execution than some more legacy platforms. Highly recommend the Academy. Check it out before you start the implementation. You will not be disappointed.
Hey, Stanley, just a reference point. It's been recently rebranded or relaunched as Reltio Learn. So if you're familiar with Reltio Academy, now look for Reltio Learn. The simple URL is learn.reltio.com. Thank you, Kelly, for posting that in the chat.
Oh, yes, that's great. And that just rolled out, Matt. When was that live?
Just last Friday.
Nice. Okay. I will update that on here before we share it.
Thanks. Thanks, Stanley.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I see Haley on too. Thank you guys for joining. All
We
right.
have several questions. I don't know if there's other things that you guys wanted to present before I start asking questions.
Let me do this, Chris. So
Okay, go ahead.
I think the rest of this checklist will be relatively self-explanatory and common sense as you progress through the items, you read the details. Let me hit the roles and responsibilities, and then we'll do questions the rest of the way. Does that sound good?
Perfect.
Excellent. Actually, I'm going to do one more quick summary on the most common things missed. Then I'll hit roles, and then we'll close out with questions. I'll make it quick. Thank you, folks. So I know these are some good questions, so I want to get to them. So most common items that are missed in this preparation that will slow your implementation, that will cause you to miss value, which we're all here for, right? As Rakesh was highlighting, access to that data, source system licensing issues, not having approval. I think he just hit on unknown masking requirements, items like that. Data quality, so no ability to execute on that profiling, new source system requirements, mid-project, so making sure we prepare for those. Data load delays, not having a decision on that integration path or ETL tool, and then just general readiness, lack of documentation, implementation resources, wherever they may be, and we'll hit on what those should be in a moment, but not having them ready or not enough time, and then lack of business owner support, critical one there. Let me jump to team structure quickly here. So on the upper left, this would be our customer side, and broad example here, but common. So customer side, we want that product owner. Often we're coming in with the IT team, and then of course a program manager that we would be teamed with. And then really to highlight, the business owner and getting proper business involvement is just critical. There have been a number of times that we've seen, and I'm sure everyone has seen on IT projects, where perhaps the wrong business owner was involved, sign-offs were made, and then you come to user acceptance testing, and there's a broad revision, which can affect the data model in our case. We really want to avoid that. We want to make sure they get input, buy-in, et cetera. It's a critical piece there. Sometimes there is an SI involved, a partner of Reltio, if that's the scenario, and if not, we would bring these roles ourselves. So if there is an SI involved, they're often bringing a BA, integration architect, project lead, of course, and a Reltio developer. And then we'll want to think long-term too on the customer side. When we leave or the SI leaves, who are the developers long-term, who's owning it, and who will configure it going forward, unless a partner is retained long-term. And then of course, Reltio. So you would have a non-billable role, practice lead like myself, an architect like Rakesh doing the design and getting those deliverables accomplished, a TDM, a technical delivery manager, ensuring all these progress to timeline and to scope, and then a solution consultant. They're one of the developer type roles that does configuration. All right, last two here, and we'll do questions. This slide, so we'll have this out here for you. This just gives you a briefer, longer breakdown of what the roles are, what you can expect from them, from their delivery and their specific tasks. So we just mentioned those four here. And then this last one, sometimes Reltio will bring that integration consultant. Let's say we're using RIH, Reltio Integration Hub, to integrate with the downstream system, something like that, Snowflake, what have you, Snowflake connector there, and they would be the individual delivering on that scope. Lastly, here's a great list of general roles we're looking for from the customer partner side that we want to make sure to check through. There may be some overlap, and that's okay, but we want to make sure these tasks are being accounted for. And then on the right side, this will give you a good feel for how much of their time do we need. And it may go if it's 100% over here on the right, that may not be the whole way through the whole project, and we outline that for you here, up to 100% through for those team members, those developers, those designers, those testers. They're going to be pretty heavy, and we want to make sure they understand that that's the case. And then for someone like the executive sponsor, up to 4 hours per week, and that'll spike up and down accordingly. But we want to make sure these folks know their role and that they're ready for the time commitment. And if there are risks and concerns, we can help mitigate those, but it's much better to have that discussion up front. All right, back to questions.
Well, the beauty is Gino was so kind to answer most of these questions because they were not necessarily related to the implementation, but some good call outs from a training standpoint. So hopefully Haley and Matt are on about, business kind of led training. Really cool. And let's see here, instructor led course for business. I love it. I put 100 there. Can we do data format before or after persist in Reltio? For example, we have some bad data with incorrect date of birth formats. Do you know I don't know if that's for you, Stanley, if you know, but.
Go ahead, Rakesh.
Usually, especially the dates, right? I mean, the Reltio console data loader does support different types of formats with respect to the date. You can definitely load it in whichever format you are getting it from the source system. That's definitely possible. But again, Reltio has certain standards defined, and if it is some other different standard, then there is a transformation required before loading that data into the specific format.
Cool. And one thing about the checklist, how about questions in the checklist for data archival? Is there anything like that in the checklist?
Great question. Data archival is important as well. I think the history and the logs, like depending on the vertical, it varies by the vertical. So Reltio has some standard capabilities with respect to the storage, especially talking about the history and audit logs. Depending on the vertical, it would change. So it's best to identify the requirements and then verify if that is satisfied by the Reltio platform. If not, a request can be submitted to change those durations.
Thank you. And Kelly mentions, and thank you so much for your participation, Kelly, but it's also critical that the product owner and the business and team have appropriate access to training. This has nothing to do with implementation, but would love for them to have more access to some of that stuff. So, Gino.
Question, how is that not related to implementation when the PO, the business, and the dev team are the ones that are making decisions related to the implementation?
No, you're right. My apologies. I just meant like specific to implementation, but yeah, you're right. I mean, definitely.
Definitely, really.
Because I have to write requirements, right, and help understand what's going on.
Very good point. And Gino mentions he agrees. Let's see what else.
Yeah. And great. And Kelly, I'll have a takeaway there on how long it took you to receive it. But I'm glad to see once you did that you learned a lot and wanted to learn more.
Oh, yeah. And these community events are amazing. So thank you, Chris, for all your hard work.
Well, and thank you for your participation. I saw that you posted some stuff on the community, so that was cool. Can Reltio Integration Hub be used as a transformation tool? Does anybody have any thoughts around that? We do have a lot of, go ahead. Gosh,
Yeah,
sorry.
I mean, its basic use is for the integration, and it does support some sort of transformations. And I think by using Ruby scripts, we can do some heavy lifting as well. But yes, RIH can be used for transformations. Yes.
Great. And it looks like all the other questions related to training, and Haley's been answering some of those, so thank you. Did I miss anything? Anybody want to speak up? Have any questions? We have a few minutes. Hope I didn't miss anything. Great. Well, Stanley, Rakesh, thank you so much. There was tons of questions around implementation, and really sparked a lot of interest in this group. So that was really cool. Sounds like we might need, additional, or if you have additional insights, Stanley or Rakesh, and want to come on to do another show that you think would be helpful, that'd be really great. Other than that, this is recorded, and I will have this out because it seems like you guys are very interested in this as soon as possible. If not today, sometime this week for sure. I will also email everyone that was on this call so that you have access to both the show, the recording, and the link to the document. So other than that, thank you, everyone. Please take the survey at the end of the show whenever you leave. Your feedback is certainly precious, and we value that very much. So thank you, everyone, for coming. Until next time, we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.